So the next tube that you can see in this series of tubes connecting to the end of the epididymis is the vas deferens, or the ductus deferens. And this tube carries sperm from the epididymis to the ejaculatory ducts, which I'll come on to show you in a moment. But this tube, the vas deferens, is itself carried in the spermatic cord, and this spermatic cord travels in the inguinal canal. So there's a lot to talk about with the spermatic cord, and I'll do a separate tutorial on this. So as you can see here, the ductus deferens passes up and over the bladder, and then it passes posteriorly and medially behind it. So I've just zoomed in a little closer, and you can see two other structures here. You can see the seminal vesicles and the prostate gland. So the seminal vesicles lie either side of the ductus deferens, and these are responsible for producing seminal fluid, which makes up 60 to 70% of the total volume of semen. And this fluid contains things like proteins, amino acids, prostaglandins, fructose, and several other things. And where the ductus deferens terminates is the prostate gland. So you can see this round structure sitting underneath the bladder. So this is the largest accessory gland of the male reproductive system, and it can be palpated through the rectum. So in a digital rectal examination, the posterior aspect of the prostate can be felt through the anterior wall of the rectum. So that's an important relationship to know about. So in the male reproductive system, you've got three accessory glands. So you've got the two seminal vesicles, which I just showed you. You've got the single prostate gland, and then you've got two bulbourethral glands, which I'll come on to talk about in a moment. So what I'd like to do next is just switch over to a cross-sectional model to show you how the ductus deferens joins with the prostate and the seminal vesicles to form the ejaculatory ducts. So now we've got this model of the bladder at the top with the prostate underneath it, and posteriorly you've got the seminal vesicles, and we've got a cross section so we can look at the inside aspect of the prostate gland. So it's not shown on here, but if we just imagine that we've got the ductus deferens joining here, which I'm drawing on in green, you can see the seminal vesicle over here, and where the seminal vesicle meets the ductus deferens at the prostate, you get this duct within the prostate called the ejaculatory duct, which I've just outlined in yellow. So you can see another duct which runs through the prostate gland, and this is the urethra. So this is, because it runs through the prostate, it's called the prostatic part of the urethra. So the ejaculatory duct empties into this prostatic part of the urethra. So the urethra actually has four parts to it. So you can see the first part here, which is above the prostate. So this is called the pre-prostatic part. And then you've got the prostatic part, which I mentioned, and you've got a membranous part and a spongy part. So remember that this is just a cross section, and you've only got one seminal vesicle and one ejaculatory duct represented on this particular model, but you've got one on either side, so you've got two ejaculatory ducts on either side. So I've just switched over to another diagram just to illustrate some of these parts of the urethra. So at the top you've got the pre-prostatic part of the urethra, and at this point you've got the internal urethral sphincter, which surrounds this part of the pre-prostatic urethra. And the function of this internal urethral sphincter is to prevent the backflow of semen into the bladder. And then the next part is the prostatic urethra, which I mentioned before. So I've just drawn that on in blue. And then you've got the membranous urethra, which is the part of the urethra which passes through the deep perineal pouch, and it's surrounded by another sphincter. So you've got the external urethral sphincter, which surrounds the membranous part. And then remember I mentioned the bulbourethral glands. Well, these lie surrounded by the external urethral sphincter. So they're these pea-sized glands which lie within the deep perineal pouch, and they lie posteriorly and laterally to the membranous part of the urethra. And then the final part of the urethra is the spongy part, which is surrounded by the corpus spongiosum of the penis, which is the erectile tissue of the penis. So I just wanted to show you another diagram to explain some features of the prostatic urethra. So we're looking at the prostate gland here, and it's been opened up to show the prostatic urethra running down its midline. So you've actually got a fold of mucosa in the prostatic urethra which runs down the midline, and this fold which sticks out to form this crest is known as the urethral crest. And then on either side of the urethral crest you've got something called the urethral sinus, which is where the prostatic ducts drain into. So you can see that I've drawn this enlargement of these folds. So the urethral crest forms this circular enlargement, which is known as the seminal colliculus. And as you can see, there are 3 openings here. This middle opening that you get is called the prostatic utricle, and it doesn't really have any function, but it's this blind ending small indentation. And then on either side of the prostatic utricle you've got these other 2 little openings. So these are for the opening of the ejaculatory ducts. So those are a couple of features to know about with regard to the prostatic urethra.